Studies, and Jeff Cooper, Director, Single Family Housing at WIDA. A couple of quick housekeeping items. If you have any technical difficulties during today's webinar, please call 1-800-442-4614. And to submit questions for the Q&A portion of the webinar, locate the dark gray bar near the top of Media Sites, click on the Ask a Question icon, and a window will open. Please type your name, email address, and your question and hit send. And today's webinar will be archived on the CFS website within 1 week. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Stephanie Moulton. Stephanie?
Hello, can everybody hear me? My name is Stephanie Moulton. I'm an assistant professor at the John Glenn School of Public Affairs, and today I'm going to present some research on financial planning for first-time homebuyers. First of all, I'd like to thank the Center for Financial Security, Nicole Truog and Michael Collins for this opportunity. We're pretty excited about this research, and we look forward to your feedback. The research I'm presenting today is part of a larger project. It's a 3-year project evaluating different financial planning interventions for first-time homebuyers that's been funded in part through the Center for Financial Security, through the Financial Literacy Research Consortium grant, as well as an Ohio State University Outreach and Engagement grant, and in partnership with the Ohio Housing Finance Agency and the National Foundation for Credit Counseling. All right, so today I'm going to go over 3 basic content areas, and then we'll open it up for some discussion. First of all, I would like to give you some background of the research study that we're working on, and particularly lay out some of these special needs that first-time homebuyers may have when it comes to financial planning. Then I want to spend some time talking about the interventions that we designed to meet the homebuyer needs. And these are using technology, and we'll show you some of those things here on the webinar today. And then last, I want to share some of the early results from the financial health checkup that we've administered to our home buyers and tell you a little bit about where they're at in terms of indicators of financial health, and then also provide a comparison of some of those who have agreed to participate in our study and haven't. And then we'll turn it over for some discussion from our discussants that are here with us today, and then also for you. So without further delay, I'm going to go ahead and get started, tell you a little bit about the motivation for the research that we're doing. First of all, we know that low-income households tend to be less likely to plan for financial goals, including retirement, as well as other types of financial goals, and they're less likely to seek out assistance. So, for example, we've found in previous research that about half of individuals in the bottom third of the income distribution don't have enough money saved for retirement. We also know that these individuals that are lower income tend to not be able to either afford financial planning assistance or they simply don't seek it out. So we know this is a vulnerable population. Second, we know that a home is a potential teachable moment that we might be able to leverage to help provide some financial planning interventions for low-income home buyers. For most of these households, the first home is the largest purchase that they will have ever made, and it provides, like we said, a teachable moment. Right now, many low-income home ownership programs incorporate an element of education and counseling that a lot of you in the audience are probably familiar with. Most of this is focused on preparing for the home purchase. What we would like to do is not only look at preparing for the home purchase, but look at preparing somebody in terms of their overall financial security and well-being, and leveraging the home purchase as an opportunity to do that. And then third, another objective of our study is to look at the effectiveness of different financial planning interventions. There's been some previous research that has suggested, for example, that only face-to-face education and counseling interventions are effective. For example, a study by Hirad and Zorn of affordable gold mortgage borrowers in the early 2000s found that only education and counseling provided face-to-face was associated with reduced delinquency and default for mortgage borrowers. However, there's questions about whether or not this lack of significance for other types of interventions is really because of the intervention, or if it's simply that there's certain types of individuals that are attracted to face-to-face counseling are simply less likely to default than those who might go to counseling over the telephone or through a book. So there's a very great need to really evaluate the ability of these technology-based interventions to provide for positive outcomes. So that was the motivation undergirding our study. And then we have two primary objectives that we sought to achieve. And again, this is a 3-year study that we're engaged in. The first objective is to really design and validate some online financial planning tools for low-income populations specifically. We wanted to not only have financial planning tools, but we also wanted to provide an online financial health checkup that could be linked to different planning interventions that we could engage in with home buyers, as well as financial coaching. And we wanted this to be all part of one comprehensive package. A couple of things were guiding our development of this. First, we wanted it to be important or be applicable for low-income populations. Some of the interventions out there are tailored more to higher-income populations. We wanted to make sure that this intervention was really appropriate for low-income populations and also for home buyers. Most times when home buyers are provided with financial education and counseling, they're at what we call the pre-closing stage. They're getting ready to close on their home. So what is an appropriate intervention at that stage in the process versus months before or months after the closing process? We also wanted to make sure that our interventions were theoretically based, so following behavioral finance, as well as the goal implementation literature, and I'll talk about that in a second. We also wanted it to be lined up with Treasury's core competencies for financial education. So that was the first objective, was to design these interventions. The second objective was really to evaluate them. So again, like we said, there's lack of evidence about technology-based interventions and whether or not they really are effective. So we wanted to employ a robust study design to be able to evaluate this. I'm not going to talk in depth about the study design here. That is available in our paper if you're interested. But we were able to partner with the Ohio Housing Finance Agency, which is a state housing finance agency that provides affordable mortgages for low and moderate income households. And it's similar to other state agencies that offer similar programs financed through mortgage revenue bonds. They're affordable loans provided to low and moderate income households. The nice thing about partnering with Ohio Housing Finance Agency, they already have a pre-purchase homebuyer education program on the ground. So we were able to link into that program to provide these interventions. Also, they collect ongoing data on the people that they assist. So we're able to evaluate the effectiveness of these interventions. All right. So just to give you an overview of the financial planning needs of first-time homebuyers, when we think about financial planning, we often think about 4 critical steps. One is to first assess your financial well-being. Second is to set some financial goals. Third is to implement your goals. And then the fourth is to monitor your progress towards your goals. However, with low-income individuals and really people in general, there are challenges to following through these steps. So the design of our interventions were specifically, we kept in mind the challenges that come up and how we might address those challenges through our interventions. So the first thing when it comes to assessing financial well-being, oftentimes, particularly if you're buying a home, you may be very focused on the present. You may have what we call myopic decision frames. So you're very much focused on the current purchase of your home. You're not necessarily thinking about your overall financial health. So having a financial health assessment that gives you a picture of your overall health is one way that we can address this challenge. Another planning stage is setting financial goals. Sometimes individuals may simply lack the literacy or the skills to be able to evaluate their goals. They also may be focused on, again, the present and not so much on longer-term goals, and therefore they may not be ready or able to set those goals. So to overcome this challenge, we integrate interactive educational and planning tools into our treatment program. The third thing is actually implementing your financial goals. So you may set goals, but do you actually follow through with them? And this is often due to procrastination, which all of us do. So one of the things that we've incorporated into our treatment is actually to have individuals set implementation intentions, which is I am going to achieve this goal at this particular time. So setting a date and a time by which you're going to achieve your goal. And the last thing is monitoring your progress towards your goals. Often if we don't have somebody to hold us accountable, we're less likely to follow through with the goals that we set. So in our treatment, we've integrated in coaching so that somebody is actually contacting the individual to see how they're doing towards their goals over time. All right, so let me show you a brief overview of the tools that we've developed, and then I'll present our baseline results. The first thing that we developed was an online financial assessment tool. It's not unlike a health checkup you might take online. The purpose of this tool was to be able to be behavior-based. It's not a measure of your knowledge. It's a measure of your financial behaviors. We wanted it to be quick and easy for somebody to complete, and we wanted them to be able to complete it before they purchase their home, so it could be integrated into a pre-closing requirement. And we wanted to provide a summary to the individuals that were taking this assessment of their financial health in 5 key areas. Those areas are budgeting, saving, borrowing, home, and retirement. These 5 areas were selected to be in correspondence with the Treasury's core competencies, as well as overall indicators of financial health. We also wanted these categories to be tailored to the low and moderate income household. So you'll notice investing isn't on here explicitly as a category. However, we do work it into savings and retirement to some extent. So the idea is to give individuals, prior to home purchase, an overview of their financial health in each of these 5 areas. They basically receive a red, yellow, or green light telling them how they're doing in each of these areas after answering a series of questions. Here's just a visual of what our site looks like. It's called mymoneypath.com. If you're interested in checking it out, please contact me after the webinar. I'd be happy to give you a beta code access so you can look at this at your own leisure. I'm just going to highlight a few slides for you here. We have questions that ask about your behaviors or your habits. So, for example, this asks you about your types of accounts that you have, whether or not you directly deposit your paycheck. Then we ask you if you're willing to participate in our research study after you've answered some questions. And then when you're done, you receive a printout of your results. So, for example, here we're seeing the budgeting results for this individual. You can see this individual is red in budgeting, which means that they've got some changes that they might need to make. We let them know where they're struggling currently according to our assessment with budgeting. You can see for them, they currently have not set up a budget for your finances, and they currently are not sticking to their budget. So we point out areas that cause them to have the color that we've given them for that particular category. This is the financial health assessment. The next step is to take the financial health assessment and help the individual set some actionable goals. So to do that, we developed some financial planning tools. And the financial planning tools have 3 components. The first component is a visual display of their current position. We call it See It. So how are you doing right now compared to what a good benchmark might be? The next component of the planning tool is to set it, to pick some goals that you might be able to work towards over time. And the last one is to set an individualized action plan. This is where those implementation attentions come in, actually picking a date by which you're going to achieve your goals. So, for example, here is somebody's borrowing See It screen. So what they're visualizing is how their debt compares to what we consider to be unhealthy debt and healthy debt. They have a debt ratio currently of 36%, and you can see that they're right on that borderline between high and fair debt. After this, they would be drawn through some screens where they can actually adjust the amount of debt they have, and they can see that bar go up and down. And then they can set some goals to help lower their debt. So, for example, they can pick some action steps that might help them achieve their goals. And after that, they would set some realistic time frames by which they could achieve those goals. The third component then, after they complete this online tool, which would take about an hour to go from beginning from financial health assessment through the planning modules, they then will be followed up with for a year after home purchase with telephone-based coaching. This telephone-based coaching provides an ongoing check on their progress towards their goals. It's not the same thing as counseling or education. It's really following up with them on their own individual goals that they've set to see how they're doing towards the achievement of those goals. Also, the coach is on call to the home buyer through that first year after purchase if the individual is struggling in any way with their finances and has questions. So now what I would like to do is show you some of the early results of our study so far. So many of you work with low-income home buyers that are watching today, and you're familiar with average characteristics of this population. So far, we've had about 200 individuals enroll in our program from June 2011 through August 1st, 2011. These are, again, home buyers through Ohio Housing Finance Agency's first-time home buyer program that have agreed to participate in our study. You can see that the average credit score is about 674, which is actually a pretty good credit score. Very low income, or actually low income individuals, monthly income of $3,000, about $36,000. You can go down and you can see the debt ratio is pretty tight at 39%. Usually we consider more than 41% to be too high. And you can see that their rent payments that they were paying previously are considerably lower than what their current mortgage payments are. They do have affordable loans. Again, the Housing Finance Agency loans are designed to provide at or below interest rate mortgages. So their interest rate is on average 4.9%, and they're borrowing about $100,000 to purchase their home. So how are they doing in terms of financial health? So we look at a few of our areas just to get a baseline indicator of where these households are at in their financial health. And the first questions we ask are related to budgeting. This is just a snapshot. There's many more questions than I'm able to show here today. But just to give you a snapshot of some of the questions and how they're responding. If we look at budgeting, most of them say they're doing pretty well. 94% say they're not often short of money. 91% have their paycheck directly deposited, which again is a strong behavioral signal that they're working towards accumulating some savings. Most of them have a written spending plan, and most of them say they stick to that spending plan. However, if we look at savings, we have a little bit more area for concern. While 98% of them have a checking account, only 69% have a savings account, meaning more than 30% of our first-time homebuyers lack a savings account. 86% say that they're saving any money, whether that's in checking or savings, and only 38% say they have automatic savings. If we look at the amount that they have in their accounts, in checking, the average amount is less than $2,000. In savings, the average amount is also less than $2,000. So we have home buyers that are entering home ownership. They have decent credit, but they have some significant deficiency when it comes to having enough accumulated in case there was a financial hardship during their first year of home ownership. Now we're going to move on and look at debt. We also see that these individuals are highly leveraged, which means they have pretty large outstanding balances on non-mortgage payments. So they're entering first-time home ownership. Most of them have credit card bills. About 71% have a credit card payment every month. More than half have a car payment. You can see to the right, the average balance on all of these sources of non-mortgage debt is about $20,000. So we have home buyers entering first-time home ownership, average about $2,000 in savings with about $20,000 in non-housing debt. Now we move on to retirement. Again, these individuals are on average 33 years old. Most of them are working. About half of them have begun to think about saving for retirement, and half of them have not. We think that you can leverage the first-time home purchase as not only an opportunity to talk about general financial well-being, but also about saving for longer-term goals like retirement. For example, we see that only 42% report that they have a retirement account. On top of that, only 45.8% say they understand Social Security. The way we asked this question was also, do you know where to go for information about Social Security benefits? And only 46% said that they knew where to go to find out information about their Social Security benefits. So this signals, again, that this population could benefit from these types of interventions. The last question that I want to share with you today has to do with confidence with finances, and I find this one to be the most interesting. So we asked our home buyers on the financial health assessment how confident they were with different aspects of their finances. And what you find, ironically, is that when we ask them about making their mortgage payment, remember, these are all individuals getting ready to purchase a home, they are most confident that they're going to be able to make their mortgage payment. 92% of them report that they are very confident with making their mortgage payment. On the other hand, 83% are very confident with day-to-day finances. However, if we look at paying off debt, we see that only 76% are very confident that they're going to be able to pay off their debt. And further, only 47% are very confident that they're able to plan for future expenses. This, again, signals the potential need for interventions like this to help them with overall financial planning. Because, as we know, first-time homebuyers encounter expenses that can derail them from their progress in making their mortgage payments. Without having a solid plan to help cover those future expenses, they could not only not be able to maintain their home, but they may not build wealth through ownership. So you can see here, again, almost 11% say they aren't confident or aren't confident at all that they're going to be able to plan for their future expenses. The last thing I want to do is talk briefly about how this group of home buyers compares with home buyers who did not agree to participate in our study. So we actually can compare in aggregate the characteristics of those who consented to participate and those who did not consent to participate in our study. And what we found was that those who consent to participate in our study, the ones you're seeing here, are actually less confident with their ability to manage their finances, which we might say is good. Those who need it tend to be more likely to sign up for these types of programs. On the other hand, it may be that that group who is not agreeing to participate actually overestimates their own ability to handle their finances. While they're more confident, we find, for example, that their credit score tends to be lower and they tend to have more debt. So they may actually be in a riskier position even though they're more confident with their finances. This is something that we'll be able to watch over time and be able to evaluate as we move on. So with that, I would like to turn it over to Chris to discuss the next policy implications from this project. Thank you.
Applaud Stephanie and her colleagues for care and thoughtful comments. Clearly well thought out in terms of the theory about the way consumers make decisions and the kind of support they need and the kind of interventions that needed and carefully constructed to try to assess, evaluate in a very careful way what the impact that intervention has. I just want to make a few brief remarks. This study is obviously still very much in its early phases and it's too early to comment on any findings. So a few things that struck me. One is that while the study itself is not directly focusing on the question of intervention aimed at supporting homeownership, either the process of attaining homeownership or maintaining homeownership or dealing with delinquency, I think it's clearly relevant to all of those issues. And I just want to also point out, I think, just given the fact that HUD funding for counseling, Congress cut off funding for counseling, but there's a lot of questions about whether homeownership was we're overextended as a nation into homeownership coming out of the foreclosure crisis. I just want to say my sense is that in fact that might lead one to believe that support for counseling and believe in counseling is potential efficacy is going away. But in fact, I think that there's lots of reasons, a lot of energy actually around trying to rethink counseling and education and the kind of intervention that Stephanie and her colleagues talked about more is actually, there's a lot of energy and thought going into what we ought to be doing that domain. In part, or not small part, because of the fact that the foreclosure crisis really highlighted the fact that there are a lot of risks, both the lenders and the borrowers, and that's the extent that we are going to continue to lend to lower income, lower wealth households. We do need to have more effective means of preparing, supporting homeowners. So I've seen a lot of interest by both the private sector and the public sector in trying to understand better what the intervention part of might work. And there really are four domains, four different points of intervention that are distinguishable and important. One of them has to do with long-range planning for homeownership, the decision about whether buying is an appropriate decision, and to the extent that it is, how to prepare financially, how to search for a home, how to search for a mortgage, all those things need to be addressed. There's also more interest nowadays in what we refer to as pre-closing counseling, the idea that there ought to be a check in the process, that when people have made a decision to purchase a home before they actually close on that deal, that there's some counseling that's provided to make sure that the choices they made are appropriate. And then there's post-purchase support and monitoring to ensure that people, once they have purchased a home, that they are being able to manage their finances and manage the responsibility of home ownership to not get into trouble. And then finally, if they do get into trouble, there's delinquency counseling to help resolve delinquency in a way to maintain home ownership as much as possible or to exit with damage to the individual's financial situation as possible. And what I would say is that we tend to broad brush counseling as counseling to help homeowners. So those really are very distinct points of intervention. And also, I think, even though we have had studies such as the Harada source study that's been widely cited that gives support for pre-purchase counseling having effects, there's also been recent work by the Urban Institute showing positive effects in terms of delinquency counseling. What we know very little about are the actual mechanisms by which counseling helps. And I think what we really need is a better understanding of just rather than broad brush, does this help or not, is specifically what are the best interventions that are needed to be able to support homeowners. And I think that this is an example of a type of intervention that's very carefully designed to try to think through those issues. So certainly applaud Stephanie and her colleagues. Second point is that I think it's really important that this study is focusing on fostering behavioral change. Traditional counseling and education for homeowners is largely aimed at providing clients with information. The idea being that a lack of understanding about the home buying process, the responsibility of home buying, maybe a lack of financial literacy are key factors that impede people from being successful. But in fact, I think that in many cases it's not real education that's needed as much as it is a change in habits that's required. We were involved in doing some focus groups with low-income populations that were involved with various types of service organizations, providing housing counseling, providing tax preparation services, providing IDA, individual development accounts, and the like. So all groups that had self-selected to get assistance all around financial issues. And we were exploring the question of whether or not they felt about the need for counseling and education and how that might help them. And what came from that was really a sense that, for the most part, when it came to savings and financial management, people had a very good sense of what they needed to do, and the way they needed to control their finances, the fact that they needed to put money aside, and the like. And that really the obstacles were more about a motivation to pursue those goals, and then changing and monitoring their habits. And that, in many cases, counseling was viewed as a negative because of the fact that somebody coming in and telling you what to do, someone judging you. But in fact, what they needed was an internal decision to make a change in their habits, and then support along the way, which could come from a coach or could come from a peer group. So I think what this study has designed, this idea of a self-directed goal coupled with coaching, is actually a form of intervention that would have a lot of value, both in, say, pre-purchase counseling and helping people to get their financial situation in order to be able to purchase, in post-purchase situation to be able to maintain home ownership, and in a delinquency situation where they need to take steps to resolve their financial situation. So I really think that this aspect of coaching, the behavioral change component of the study is really an important piece of what needs to be part of counseling education, a bundle of services. And then finally, I think that the study's innovation and the delivery method is really important as well. Counseling and education and coaching have one of the two primary obstacles, two of the fundamental obstacles to more widespread availability of these services. One is that the need to have these services widely available geographically. Oftentimes the provided kind of assistance tend to be located in inner cities. They're less available in suburban areas, less available in rural areas. And the other issue has to do with the convenience of the time of service. People's lives are busy, and trying to get to those places during the day is difficult. Weekend time is valuable. So being able to deliver services in a way that's convenient in terms of time and place to people is really critical. And the other issue, of course, is cost. The provision of face-to-face services is very expensive and prohibitive in many cases. And so trying to find ways that address both of the availability and the spatial aspect of the services as well as the cost are important. And this study really, by combining internet web-based assistance, actually is available widely, as obviously the cost is low. And the fact that it's also self-directed goes back to the behavioral aspect of this and having people be able to tailor the way they interact with the system as most fits their needs and goals. And then to combine that, however,
the one-on-one assistance by telephone is able to minimize the amount of that one-on-one assistance that's needed, also to bring it, make it available in a time and place that's convenient as well. So the combination of those two methods of delivering the assistance in this case, I think, really holds a lot of promise for both in education and counseling as well, in how other types of assistance might be tailored. So I think that the findings from this study will really have wide applicability to a whole host of interventions designed to support households around financial decision-making and practices. So those are my observations.
All right, great. We're going to turn it over to Jeff Cooper, the Director of Single-Family Housing at WIDA. Jeff?
Thank you, Nicole. I'd also like to thank the researchers for doing some fine work, and it was definitely a very good read. Having been involved with the single-family business now for 20 years, I thought it might be helpful just to provide my background and how it may vary. I'm not a researcher and I'm not a practitioner. My background has been on the mortgage side of the business, but always involved with home buyer preparation. As a member of the NCHEC Advisory Board, the body several years ago that established the national standards for home ownership, education, counseling, and the curriculum and the standards for the educators. The Freddie Mac Affordable Housing Advisory Board was a former director of emerging markets at MGIC, where we developed programs that really centered on trying to drive borrowers to effective home buyer education. And then in Milwaukee, was chairman of Select Milwaukee, a NeighborWorks organization that's based in the city. Currently, I'm director of single family at WIDA, and WIDA is Wisconsin's version of the Ohio Housing Finance Authority. So I'd like to say hi to my friends at OFA if you're on the webinar. We are, by my knowledge, the only lender in the state that has a home buyer education requirement prior to close. So forgive me if I look at this from a home buyer education requirement as opposed to strictly financial planning, but I think it's important to do so in this context because Stephanie has identified home ownership as a teachable moment. One takeaway at a very high level I wanted to mention here is that, before I get into my comments, is that I think Stephanie's research is pointing out that people are resourceful when it comes to making ends meet on a day-to-day basis. When I say people, I'm talking about the target audience, low to moderate income households. But they are generally unable to save money and build wealth through savings. So what are we preparing for? What are we preparing individuals for? Historically, we've looked at buying a home. We're preparing an individual to go out and buy their first home. And what Stephanie's research is really pointing out, it's shifting the focus. Not only buying a home, but building a strong household. From the standpoint of that household balance sheet, I break it down into equity. Equity, what is equity? It's retirement. It's the long-term savings. It's the investments that a household may have. What is the loan loss reserve for that household? It is the rainy day fund, the savings for college, the other savings that have been put away for expected life expenses, and then cash flow. And that is the ability to meet monthly obligations and save money. So her research is really focusing on a much larger goal than just home ownership attainment. And for that, I definitely applaud that. And I think that, unfortunately, for better or for worse, home buyer education too often has been seen as a barrier. And when I say a barrier, I mean a barrier to home ownership. So from the vantage point of the borrower, it's been something I must do prior to closing my home. Or from the standpoint of the lender, it's been something I must have that borrower do before I can close the loan. And really what we need to do is, I think, focus on home buyer education and financial planning as a benefit. And I think it's by focusing more on financial planning and less on the short-term attainment of closing your home loan, you're starting to drive that individual to a broader perspective that this is beneficial to me. And perception, I think, is important to learning. If it's perceived as a barrier, it's gone at that way. If it's perceived as a long-term benefit to my household balance sheet, an entirely different perspective comes over. So how do we get the individual at that teachable moment to see that? And then short-term goal or a long-term success. Short-term goal, we've always said, okay, buying a home, but historically we've also focused on being able to afford that home over the long term. That's really a short-term goal in the framework of this research. The long-term goal is not only being able to afford that home over the long term, but it's being able to grow wealth, savings, plan for retirement, and improve your financial health completely for the household. So really raising the question, is home ownership a teachable moment from a financial planning standpoint? I believe it is. However, we really need to think of how we get that we maximize that teachable moment at the point of buying a home. The next slide is titled "Housing Crisis Has Changed Little." And getting back to the concept of a teachable moment, today if you say financial planning to a mortgage lender or to a borrower, they're more likely than not going to say, okay, that's something that must be done in order to get a home, whether I need to complete this prior to closing or whether I need to participate in this for a year or 6 months or however long after closing. So we need to really think about how this requirement can not be seen as a barrier. What has amazed me is when the subprime index exploded back in 2007 and the housing market started its sure but steady collapse, is that the home buyer education requirements today are still seen as a barrier. I would have thought, and I'm sure many of you had this conversation back in 2007, that now is the time for everybody to understand the importance of preparing home buyers for success. And here we are 4 years later, and not only has home buyer counseling been cut from the fiscal 11 budget, but now seemingly it's been eliminated from the fiscal 2012 budget. So there's going to continue to be home buyer education capacity and coverage issues. Here in Wisconsin, there are 25 counties upstate where there's absolutely no location providing home buyer education. The other thing that is a little remarkable after 4 years after the subprime implosion and the cost crunch for counseling agencies is that home buyer education providers generally have not adapted to new technologies and social media. My Money Path is a very good example of a program that has adapted, and eHomeAmerica.org and CCCS of San Francisco also has a web-based educational platform that it fulfills with telecounseling. Those multimodal approaches, I think, are going to be needed to reduce the cost of providing educational services in that teachable moment and allow them to achieve some scale. But as Chris pointed out, to really drive education to the borrower at the point where they're going to be most receptive, which may not be taking off work or an 8-hour session on a Saturday, but may be 2 hours after work at night in front of their own home computer. One of the other things that's important to note is 4 years after the crisis has ensued, there's still no proven self-sustaining cost revenue model for home buyer education. And I think we need to get there. If you have any ideas, we'd love to hear them. But it's definitely something that needs to occur. And the focus is still largely on home buyer education as opposed to financial planning. In fact, My Money Path is really the only model I've heard of that's really trying to address the broader financial health of the household and not just the attainment of home ownership. So lastly, next steps. Just a few thoughts I had after completing the reading of the paper is that I still think we need to find ways to use incentives to maximize the teachable moment and eliminate the thought process that this is a barrier and maximize the thought process that this is a benefit from the borrower's standpoint and the lender's. Now, I understand the lender, once they close the loan, they've moved on, and financial planning is something that's going to occur after closing of the loan. But as we look at home purchase as a teachable moment, the question is this going to be part and parcel of a lender program? Or is it going to be something that just is approached to the borrower or presented to the borrower after they close the loan? I still think that there are a number of valid reasons to have home buyer education be part and parcel of a lender program, followed by financial planning. So what could some immediate incentives be? We had worked with and toyed with ideas such as giving the borrower a slight reduction in interest rate upon attaining certain financial planning goals. When I was Mortgage Guarantee Insurance Corporation as their Director of Emerging Markets, we actually ran a pilot program where we gave the borrower reduced cost of mortgage insurance, and we paid the nonprofit a $250 fee for completion of the home buyer education. We also ran a program with a local home builder where if the borrower post-close was able to meet quarterly goals for 4 quarters of home buyer education, they would receive 1 month's PITI into their savings account. From from a borrower's perspective on a long-term incentive, home ownership club benefits. In other words, if you achieve these goals, you become a member of the home ownership club, and with that, you get savings at Home Depot, you get savings at Lowe's, at Menards. You get presented offers that can enhance, your financial opportunities. So there may be an element of that. And also, the last part is we did talk a little bit about a structured loan warranty or a structured home warranty product. That if you achieve these goals post-close at a certain point in time, you may be presented with a 1 year's free home warranty product, which is the same as putting money in the pocket of the individual in the event that they have a need to tap into that home warranty coverage that year. From a lender standpoint, what sorts of incentives? Well, it's a little harder in light of Dodd-Frank and in light of the lender compensation rules that have come into place to really create an incentive for lenders. However, the credit risk retention rule, which will drive down to the lender level the need to retain risk on loans that it sells forward, may create an opportunity. For example, an HFA or a wholesaler may say to its partner lenders that if your borrowers complete this, we'll reduce the amount of credit risk we might force you to retain. Or they might even say that, look, we have an early payment default provision where you'll buy this loan back if the borrower goes into default. We'll waive that if your borrower achieves this. So you might be able to create incentives for lenders to make this a teachable moment as well. I've already made my advocacy for web-based delivery. I believe it reduces costs, provides limitless capacity, and eliminates coverage issues. And then you have to raise the question of who pays for this. In some regards, you get what you pay for. A borrower who hasn't paid anything into the education may, in fact, be less likely to stick with it. They may be less likely to stick with the financial planning if they haven't made some payout for it. And then we have to determine what constitutes success and measure its value to the stakeholders. To the extent homebuyer education with financial planning as an extended component remains part of a loan program, you have two stakeholders. You have the borrower, and then you have the lender. And if the measurable is loan performance, and you can validate over time that loans perform because of this, then there are ways to, again, go back and drive incentives to the lender to continue to make that part and parcel of their programs. You may want multiple outcomes. In other words, from a borrower standpoint, we want long-term savings for retirement, better credit management, but only one of those can really be measured that is relevant to the stakeholders at the teachable moment, and that might be mortgage loan performance. So I wouldn't lose sight of that. So basically, just to round out my comments, I wanted to thanks to Stephanie and the other researchers for their efforts. Looking forward to myself getting a beta code and going into the My Money Path site and poking around. I had not had a chance to do that, and we're very happy to be a discussant here today. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff. If anyone has any questions, please submit those via the media site option. We have a couple of minutes. Stephanie, are you still on the line?
Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes. Okay. So, yes, a question came in for you to ask, what are some of the challenges to date that the coaches are encountering?
Are you there?
Or any themes that are in common of roadblocks or successes that the coaches are seeing with participants?
So I think, can you hear me? Hello?
Yes.
Okay. I think one of the main roadblocks is simply getting people to sign up after purchase. I think this has been a problem from the beginning of home ownership education and counseling programs. We're trying to follow up with them after purchase for a year. And I think one of the biggest challenges is really hooking them. So I think Jeff hit it right on when he said that what are the incentives that we need to have in place so that individuals do stay engaged in this. We are getting about 60% of individuals to engage prior to closing without having a requirement. But after closing, it's more challenging. So figuring out the ways to hook those borrowers. We are finding so far the borrowers that have participated in the coaching have loved it. They've responded very favorably. They said it was exactly what they were looking for, exactly what they needed. They really enjoyed it, so that's a kudos to our coaches. But again, it's getting people to make that, to follow through with the coaching. And that's something that we're still playing with, how to, we do provide a $25 Target gift card. Now we've recently added to try to incentivize them. But I think that's the challenge, is figuring out what are those incentives that need to be in place to help people follow through with that goal.
Great. Thanks, Stephanie. I guess we're nearing our 2 o'clock central cutoff, so I'll just ask if Jeff, Chris, or Stephanie have any last comments that you'd like to make. Okay, well then, Chris, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I think I just wanted again to applaud Stephanie for the work she's doing. I thought Jeff's overview of the issues was great, and I want to thank you, Nicole, for hosting the seminar.
Thank you. Well, this webinar will be archived on the CFS website, and that web address is cfs.wisc.edu. And our next webinar is taking place on Tuesday, October 11th at 1 p.m. Central. And Michael Collins, the Faculty Director of the Center for Financial Security, will present Coming Up with Cash in a Pinch, Emergency Savings and Its Alternatives. So you'll be seeing a registration email sent to you within the next couple of weeks. Thanks, and have a great day.
Thank you.